Let's bring in our next guest. It's going to be Landon Swan. Landon, we're talking Delta Airlines today, unofficially kind of kicking off earnings season here, Landon. This stock has actually done pretty well. It's always known to have the best margins in the business, the best business. The CEO is pretty good, Ed Bastian, always making some pretty positive commentary. But they've got some headwinds coming up because I know fuel prices are going to be discussed. But what kind of data do you guys have as far as sentiment goes?
Yeah, when you look at Delta compared to the other big three, I mean, the stock performance is crazy. I mean, Southwest, United, and American, their stock chart almost looks identical. Southwest has got a little bit more of a hiccup in it, but, they ramped up in July, sold off, made a little recovery, and then they're flat, right? That's what all three of those look like. But Delta's has made a full recovery from that sell-off. And they're back testing highs. I think their last high in July was like 49, and now they're 47. A few days ago they tested it. So it's really interesting to see the difference in how investors are treating Delta versus the other three. And I think a lot of it has to do with their approach. They are the more, I think, premium airline. They've got to focus on premium seats. Their total main cabin revenue increased 20%. But the premium seating cabin increased 26%. So it's interesting to see that, that focus and how it's going to come through. One of the things that we always look at, though, of course, is happiness. And with happiness, Delta has always been one of the higher ones. But we're seeing a kind of an interesting phenomenon lately when it comes to consumer happiness. It's not just the experience, but it's also the pricing's playing a lot more into that, where it used to just be what's the experience. And so it was always Southwest and Delta at the top of this. Southwest had its hiccups. It's made a little bit of a comeback, obviously. But Delta's now behind American. I think a lot of it has to do with people talking about the pricing and what the value is here. But good news for Delta investors, they're not worried about giving people that low price. They want higher prices. They want people to pay more for the seats. And they're actually accomplishing that very well. So love to see that from them. We know that business travel is making a big comeback. They rely heavily on that. And the metrics that we have on Delta are pretty strong. Their mentions are up about 40% on a year-over-year basis. Their web visits are up 9% on a year-over-year basis, which is good. Not as good as their competition, interestingly enough, but still very strong. And you can see here, looking at that stock chart, just like I was talking about, sell-off from July down to November, October, and then it's back, and web mentions are where they need to be. So this is strong data for this company. A little bit of a pullback, not much, just a few dollars going into earnings. So maybe there's some value here, but I know that expectations are going to be pretty high, just considering where this stock is compared to the other three big airlines. It's just no comparison. I mean, investors are clearly anticipating a stronger report from Delta than they are from the other three this quarter. And so I think they have a little bit of a high bar here. But the data that we have says that, things are going pretty well. And, just to kind of piggyback on that Boeing story, they've got no exposure there. So that's, clear sailing for them.
Guys, if we could put up the consumer happiness chart that Landon sent us. Landon, this is why I don't bet. Because if you asked me to bet, I would have said this was the opposite direction. Is there a tone change going on with Southwest regaining some consumer happiness? Because, as you know, they've gone through some problems and had some horrible consumer numbers that you've reported. Why is there this flip going on here?
Yeah, they have had some bad ones. Now, keep in mind, this is just the last 90 days, so it's a little bit zoomed in. We're seeing where things are going, and what we said the same thing, right, when we saw this chart. We're like, yeah, wait a minute, Southwest has been disappointing people like crazy. But I think when we dove into the actual mentions and read them and looked at, sample sizes, what is happening is people are talking about the value that they're getting in the price, because a lot of the the prices have gone very high. They've got repair costs are up 40% since 2019. Fuel costs are up. Everything's going up, inflation. So, people are very more price sensitive. At least the flyers of Southwest are. And so they're happy when they're, leisure flyers are looking at Southwest and they're looking at Delta, and Southwest is a great deal. And I think the tone basically is Delta saying, that's fine, Southwest, you can have them. We want the business travelers. We want the people that are willing to pay a little bit more for the seats. And I think that's why their stock is reacting so well. So the happiness is, remember, we're polling the masses here. And so this is everybody, and it's, the people that are willing to pay a little bit more, they're not on there talking about the deal that they got on Southwest or Delta. They're just comfortable. So I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, and it's amazing, Landon. 5-6 years ago, I could book a economy seat, and because of my priority, I'd probably get upgraded about 3/4 of the time. Now it's like there's a wait list of 80 people to get into business class because everybody wants that upgraded service here. So I'm not surprised by that. But when you look at the stock price and the move that we've seen since the end of October, back up to these levels near 49, I mean, it tracks your consumer mention data, up 41% year over year, pretty well. So where are you guys looking going into earnings here?
If we were just looking at Delta and we had blinders on for the other three companies, our score is plus 23, and that's just looking at Delta. It takes into account macro factors, things like that. So we're slightly bullish on it. But what's really interesting, because anybody who invests in Delta is considering invest in Southwest American and United, and those stock charts are, like I said, they're completely different. And so I think the expectations are going to be a little bit higher here, and any kind of beat is going to pull up the other three, and any kind of miss may not hurt the other three that much. So it's interesting. If I had to be a long-term investor in any one of these companies, it's going to be Delta on pullbacks for sure. On this earnings report, slightly bullish, but because they're the one out of the four who've had this great stock reaction over the last few months, we know that expectations are high. The data supports high expectations, so it's just going to be a little bit of a game between what analysts really expected and what really comes in. So we're cautiously bullish going into this one.
Yeah, that move going into it, I know that you guys talk a lot about that with your data. It's like, yeah, we had the data a couple months ago, but now we've got that move already higher, so you're starting to get a little bit nervous. Great stuff as always, Landon. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right, that's Landon Swan, co-founder at Likefolio, breaking down the data for us. Kev, I mean, I